today. But it was getting kind of dry, a little dusty. And I know that from personal experience, see, because I helped coach a little t-ball team. And I know it's dusty because the only reason they come out there is to play in that dust between the infield grass and the outfield grass. All that batting and throwing stuff is just something that coaches make them do. But the real reason for being there is to play in the dirt. And it was getting kind of dry, so thank God for always blessing us in the ways He does. Yes, today we're going to do things a little bit differently this morning. So I'd like the kids to come on down and maybe some adult helpers to get them organized. And kind of spread out, an even number on each side on the front benches here, if you don't mind. And these I call our Magettes. They're not quite Magi yet. You might want to bring two of you on this side to help out. Okay, thank you. So what we wanted to do was begin by introducing the 2019 campaign for the Magi Project. And for most of you here, this is old news, but there may be some who are visiting and don't quite understand it. So I'll do a little bit of explanation. This is our 8th year. That's somewhat of a Bible number, isn't it? Kind of cool. But it's our 8th year to participate in this ministry all about the churches of Christ in the United States through Healing Hands International. So I put up some collage here, some pictures that the folks from Healing Hands have taken over the years on their various trips. These are primarily from Central and South America. But they also go to Europe, to Romania. They go to Africa as well, to Zambia. So they're a very international project, and it's our privilege, really, to participate in that program. Like I said, this will be our 8th year to do that. So a couple of slides just to explain it. Simply put, MAGI is an acronym, actually. Nice, convenient acronym from the Christmas story. But it's all about making a godly impact. And that's the concept, to bring that moment of joy to some kids who don't get that very often. They go to very, very poor places in the world, and these kids, they have clothes on their back and a few things, but something like a box full of Christmas presents and other things is quite a surprise to them and quite a joy for them. And that's what they're about, bringing that joy in and trying to help those local evangelists get inroads into those families, into those places. So that's what really why we participate. I don't want to spend too much time there, but we always want to know if you're sending things off, sending money off to somebody that you don't deal with directly, it's all remote. You want to know that they're doing the right thing with those funds that you're sending them. And so if you go to that website there, that link that I put at the top, hhi.org, you'll find everything you want to know about Healing Hands International. And it's an organization that originally began in 1991 at David Lipscomb College. Dr. Randy Steger started the idea with a challenge to his students, a semester challenge, to put together some resources to send to Russia, to the USSR, former USSR at that time. You recall that that whole system collapsed in 1989, and by that time, in 1991, there's quite a few destitute places there in Europe. And so his goal was to get these kids organized with something to go provide relief over there. And from that, it grew. The idea just grew. And eventually, it actually became quite an inconvenience to Lipscomb College. They had to actually ask them to leave politely, but they were just taking over their campus with all the things that they were doing in terms of gathering resources to send them out. So they instituted 2 different offices now. They started in Nashville, and they have a second office near Fort Worth, Texas, Carrollton, Texas. And that's the one we've been working with lately. They're a little bit easier to get to. Of course, they're a 501c3 organization, And this shows how some of their funds, if you go to the website, you'll see the same things. I just copied them here for convenience. They do pretty well. 89% of the funds they get are going to the ministries that they talk about. And Magi is just one of several. They dig wells in really impoverished areas where people are drinking really dirty water. They go in and they sink a well for fresh water. And they do agricultural projects where they teach people how to be self-sustaining, grow your own food, and just various humanitarian projects like that. Of course, they also are all about disaster relief. So when there's a big disaster somewhere, HHI shows up. And this shows their goal also as well. Their goal is increased. Over the past few years, they've been delivering about 20,000 of these Magi boxes to various places around the world, and they'd like to jump that number up. The reason is because they've found lately they'll go into these small towns, like you saw maybe in some of those pictures I showed earlier, and they'll pass out these boxes. When we send them, they'll collect them up in the warehouse. They'll make sure they're packed with the appropriate goods, and then they put them in big overpacks and put those in a sea land crate. If you've seen those big containers that they carry on an 18-wheeler or put them on a barge, ocean barge, and they'll ship these out, and then they distribute them out to various villages from there. And they'll show up with as many as they can carry into a small village, and sure enough, they'll get to the end, and there'll be some more kids waiting in line, and they'll say, "Oh, lo siento no más." Sorry, I have no more. And they just feel terrible when that happens. And so they made a special plea this year. Could we please ask everyone to just do 10 more boxes than you did last year? Just try. And so that's why I've set up here 40 boxes, because over the past few years, that's what we've averaged, about 30 boxes. So our goal here at Skyway Hills is 40 boxes. Theirs is 30,000. So you can see it's an ambitious goal, but I think it's one that could be met because there are literally hundreds of congregations across the United States that participate in this program. So I think they'll make it with ease. The next slide shows a packing list. Inside the box, you'll find that. I'll explain that in a minute. But it just goes through, and it's their suggestions about what to put in there, because you might think, well, what do I do with this? Now, for most of you, it's old hat. You've seen this before. Pay special attention, though, to that last item on there, the bulleted item there, the bold item that says what not to include, okay? Please don't include those things. Like I said, they'll go through them when they get them, and that's part of that, about 8% overhead. They spend their time there in the warehouse trying to go through and make sure that they've been packed appropriately. Something new this year, I put in an extra little sheet. It's kind of a getting started sheet. What do I do with this? I see the big long packing list, but where do I get started? So here is 5 easy steps to get started. Very easy. Get your Magi box. We're going to take care of that this morning. Then you choose who you would like this to go to. Some small child, boy or girl, whatever age you think is best suited for yourself. And then go out and get some new items. Start with some special little wow gift, something that'll fit inside that box. They're very sturdy and very nice boxes that we get from them. We have more, actually. If you want more, just let me know. But start with that, and then add a lot of those other items that they list in that suggested packing list. Hygiene items, other toys, school supplies, things like that. And then here's the important part number 4, pray. Pray for that box, and pray especially for that child that's going to get that box. And pray for the evangelist too. I'll show you in a minute. One of the things we like to do last few years is send cases of Bibles along with our shipment of boxes. We started out trying to stuff that little Bible down in there in that box, and it became quite a chore. So instead, we just ship cases of Bibles with them and ship them separate. And that way it can get to that local evangelist, and when the family's done going through all their presents that they get in that Magi box, he has an opportunity to say, well, let me show you one more free gift from God. And he'll use that as his opportunity to share the gospel. And so pray that that missionary is successful in reaching into that family and sharing the gospel. And then finally, we want to get all of our boxes back here to us by the 20th of October. And this will allow us to make this year's 2019 Christmas shipment from the office there in Carrollton, Texas, which they have a deadline of like November 1st. So if you'll cooperate with that, would be greatly appreciated. So some questions you get from the website, Q&A. Like I said, we'll go to Fort Worth, to that Carrollton office. The deadline, October 20th. And the $7. Don't worry about that. The church takes care of that. You just bring us the boxes filled with all the love that you want to put in there for the child that you've chosen in your mind. And the church takes care of that $7 shipping cost. Now, what's that about? Well, we'll take care of the expenses to get the boxes to the warehouse where they'll then, like I described before, package it up. The $7 is to help them then take it from there and ship it to places like Honduras and wherever in Central America or over across the ocean to Europe or Africa. So, as you can imagine, that gets expensive. Hiring space on an ocean-going barge, I'm sure, is not all that cheap. So that's what that $7 is about. It's quite expensive to get them out from the United States out to the places where they want to have this impact, this godly impact. Oops, I hit the wrong one. Sorry. So, just a quick overview. There's other ministries that go with this. Like I mentioned, it's not just Magi. They have another ministry called the Dorcas Ministry, and it's coming from Acts chapter 9 about the lady named Dorcas who was always about doing good things for other people. And in this ministry, and I know we share that, there's a various groups around the country of sewing clubs and whatnot, and they'll get together and sew just small little sundresses, that kind of thing for the Magi Project. So, we might want to consider doing something like that. And I got a lot more information about how to do that if we want to. So what to do again, recap, use the suggested packing list, make it a personal mission for yourself, involve your family. We did that last year. We involved our little guys from Wednesday night class, and they packed their own little boxes. And it just gets them into that mindset that, we're not here it's not just about us. Help train them, even from small size up, that it's about serving other people. And pray for that godly impact, and consider 2 Corinthians 4, verses 6 and 7, which says, "For it is God who commanded light to shine out of darkness, who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us." So that's what these little vessels are all about. Carrying that power, that light, that goodness of God out into dark places in the world. So it's your choice to help participate in that. Of course, we don't want to make it a have-to thing. It's a want-to thing. And of course, one final thought about why do this, as we read in Deuteronomy, it's always from the beginning been important to teach people about God. Yes, there is God, a one God, and you shall love Him with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, is here to save you. That's all this is about, reaching out and carrying that message. So it's our way of helping get that done. So at this point, I would like our Magettes to please stand up. And what I want the audience to do is, if you want a box, these little guys are going to bring it to you. So if you would raise your hand, please indicate you want a box, and our little helpers will come and help distribute them. So if you guys could. Anybody that wants a box, please raise your hand. Remember, we're trying to stretch this year, and if you want more than one box, raise two hands. Or, keep your hand up till you get all that you want. And while they're doing that, I want to tell you a little story about something that I heard here recently, just this week. Back in the old days, if you had a good working knowledge of the Bible, of the Scriptures, and were willing to do so, you could do all right as an itinerant preacher, right? You could go out there and find these small country churches and preach to them, and they might give you a little money for your efforts. So I want to share with you a story about a young preacher who did this. He and his son traveled to a small little way out in the woods church to deliver a message. And he met with them, and he did a great job. I mean, he just delivered an awesome sermon that morning to this small country church. And the old pastor of the church came to him afterwards and said, "Man, that was awesome. You did a spectacular job today. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate it, because we don't get that kind of thing very often here. And so I wish I could reward you for your efforts. But let me tell you, you just don't know how much of an impact you've had on our people this morning. I can see it in their eyes. They've really been uplifted. They've really been encouraged. But I'm sorry, we're just a small, poor church, and we can't share anything with you this morning." Of course, the young man, he was very gracious about it. He said, "That's okay. My reward is just in sharing the gospel. I'm good. You don't have to worry about me." Well, the old pastor said, "Well, I got to go greet the folks." So he rushes off to the front doors to greet people on their way out. Meanwhile, the young preacher and his son are packing up their things, getting ready to go, and he notices, hey, there's the collection box. He reaches in his pocket, finds a $5 bill. Now, in these days, $5, that's quite a bit of money. That's a really good contribution. He walks over and slips it in the box, heads out. They say their goodbyes to the old pastor and head for the car and are about to leave. Meanwhile, the old pastor goes back in. He's going to close things down for the day. And he walks by the collection box and he notices it out of the corner of his eye, and he thinks, maybe I'll check it. Maybe something was put in there. I don't know. He picks it up, shakes it. Oh, there's money in there. Holy cow. He reaches in and pulls out this $5 bill, and he goes, "This has got to be a sign from God. I got to go find that preacher." And he runs out the church, and he has to run down across the parking lot, down the road, waving them down. Hey, young man, stop. I have something for you. And he catches up to the car, and he gives him that $5. "The Lord has blessed us today, and I want to share with you this money right here. It's got to be a sign from God." Well, the young man didn't say anything about it. He was again, very gracious. He said, "Well, really, I'm okay. You don't have to." No, I insist. You've done such a good thing today. I just have to reward you like this." Well, he graciously accepts it, doesn't say anything about it. And they say their goodbyes and go on down the road. A little while later, he turns to his son. He says, "Well, boy, guess you learned a pretty good lesson today, huh?" The kid says, "Yep, sure did. If you'd have put more in that box, you got more out of it." So think about that as you consider what you're going to do with your boxes. Put all the love you can in there so that when they open that up there in Honduras or Mexico or wherever they wind up going, they'll get all that love right back. Okay? So I want to go forward then with our short lesson. A couple of weeks ago I was thinking about this. I wanted to introduce the Magi, kick it off for this year, and I thought, well, okay, I want to do a little bit more than that. What should I work on? And I got an inspiration, and I'll get to that at the very last slide. It's a very short lesson, so I won't keep you very long. But I titled it God's Sense of Humor, and it's more than okay to laugh. So I hope you'll enjoy it. But here on the cover, I put a few slides up there, and I thought these were really funny. How many of you run into the concept out there in the world where people think, your God, he's just an old sourpuss, right? And it's because they really haven't studied or learned or found out anything about God. They really don't know him. So the only thing they hear about is God wiping out this group of people or him wiping out that group of people, and he's always angry and vengeful and this kind of thing, right? And so I hope we know enough that we can share with them that that's not God at all. He really does have a good sense of humor. And so here's a few slides here, if you don't believe it, go to Walmart and watch people. See if God has a sense of humor. I like the two animal ones, that duck-billed platypus. I always thought that was hilarious. I mean, he's the ridiculous animal, isn't he? He's got a duck bill, but he's a mammal. He's got all these features that are like a mix of the different species of animals. And then, of course, the pug, you just look at him and say, "What, really?" You know. And I like what Swindoll says there. And in the lower right hand, you can be angry, you can be defeated, you can be depressed, all those things. But that's not what God intended for you to be. And that's kind of the gist of today's lesson. And Swindoll, I thought, put it very well. Life is really just 10% of what happens to us. The rest, the other 90%, that's how we react to it. You make of it what you will. That's what life is all about. So he has a great sense of humor, and why not follow that lead? And Stephen captured this in today's bulletin, but I had to repeat it. I actually preached on this part of the Bible a couple of years ago, and my focus was on the stone of remembrance, the Ebenezer, that's talked about in that section of the Bible. But here, if you recall, in 1 Samuel chapter 5, actually in chapter 4, the Israelites had treated the Ark of the Covenant like a talisman or something like that, a good luck charm, right? And so they weren't respecting God at all in the way they managed and used that gift from God, the Ark of the Covenant. And so he let them have their way. Okay, go on out there. Go on it. Well, the Philistines just kicked their tails up one side and down the other and captured the Ark and took it back, carried it back to Ashdod. And so they're feeling all big and bold about it. We kicked their rear ends, We've defeated the God of Israel. Who is he to stand up against us? And so we're going to offer the Ark of the Covenant as a tribute to our God, Dagon. And they place it in the temple. Next morning they find Dagon face down in the dirt in front of the Ark. Now that's hilarious to me. Now to the Philistines it wasn't very hilarious. They didn't think it was so funny. So they didn't know maybe there's a tremor. I don't know what happened here. So they stand the statue back up. Next day, it's not only down in the dirt, but the head's chopped off and the hands are off. God's putting an exclamation, but he's just messing with them, isn't he? He's just toying with them, trying to get their attention. Of course, it gets a lot worse from there if you read on in the story. But my point is, God has a sense of humor. He could have done things very differently to start out, but he was trying to use a sense of humor, I think. You ever heard that phrase that God is a great comedian? He's just playing to an audience that's afraid to laugh? I think he is. I think that's true. And if you know him a little better, you begin to laugh at things like this that happen. And you'll see what I mean on my last slide of the day. So what about God's sense of humor? Well, we can see a little bit of it in these scriptures here from Proverbs chapter 15. He talks about a glad heart makes a happy face. A broken heart crushes the spirit. A cheerful look brings joy to the heart. Good news makes for good health. And Proverbs 16, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Isn't that imagery what we all desire? I mean, do we really want to walk around being all mad at everything or disappointed or depressed about things? That's not what God intended. Again, go back to what Swindoll said. It's so true. It's what you make of it, right? How many people have you seen out there in your life that have this big smile, but behind it, they've had a lot of suffering in their lives. They've dealt with a lot of pain. Somehow they've grasped this concept from God. And it's like our scripture this morning. Except you enter the kingdom of God like these little kids. They don't know everything. They don't have all the answers. All they know is Jesus, and I can trust him. That's all they know. And that's enough. That's what God's telling us. And if we have an attitude like that, we can hold on to these things, and we can go through life with a happy heart instead of a crushed spirit. We can be cheerful and bring good news instead of all the sad news. And so, I think that's important. We sometimes miss that in our understanding of God. But sadly, some people just can't take his advice. Now here's where I found out this morning that my choice of this topic was Spirit-led, because Ken confirmed that this morning in our men's class, and you guys will know what I mean here in just a second. Because I referenced here in this part 2014, the death of Robin Williams. Everybody knows Robin Williams, right? And what a tremendous tragedy when we found out he'd killed himself. He committed suicide. Why? This guy was one of the funniest guys you'd ever see, right? I mean, it's within bounds, but he was funny. He was truly funny. A great entertainer. And you'd look at him, you'd think, you're so successful. TV, movies, Broadway, all these things. He enjoyed such stellar success, and yet it wasn't enough for him. It wasn't enough to go on living. He took his own life, didn't he? So it just seems that all that joy and laughter that he gave other people just wasn't enough to fill some void inside, some pain that he was hiding inside. That's what makes it so hard for us to grasp. Why did he do that? And Ken described this morning a friend of his that went through a similar thing, who in fact is right now in recovery, hopefully in recovery from an attempt on his own life. And it just points to how some people, we see them on the outside, we think everything's fine, they're smiling, they may be saying all the right things, but somewhere down inside, they're extremely insecure. Somewhere down inside, there's a lot of pain, and they're hiding it. They're keeping it a secret. And that's the part that's so dangerous. Because when we keep things like that secret, that's a leverage, that's a handle, a tool for Satan to use in our lives, for him to grab hold of and twist us in the wind and turn us in a direction that we shouldn't be going. But we don't know any better because we're so self-consumed with all that pain. It's when we drag all that pain, all those monsters that we're fighting against inside, when we drag them out into the open and shed that light on them, that's when they lose their power. And that's the trick. That's the trick for us if we know somebody that we suspect may be going through that. Help them drag those things out into the light. Get them out there. Don't let them keep fighting it on their own, because they can't. They need the help of Jesus. For some reason, they don't get the message that Jesus spoke in John 10:10. Let me read it to you. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. That's what Jesus came for. That's what these scriptures point to from Isaiah 61. Recall, this is what Jesus read when he was handed the scroll, when he went home to the synagogue and he was going to preach. He was handed the scroll from Isaiah and he read this passage. And he turned and he said to him, today, in your hearing, this has happened. That's what it's about. John chapter 8. Verse 12, Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness, because you'll have the light that leads to life. That's the secret. That's the cure for all that pain. Somehow we've got to be able to help people understand that a little better. And hopefully we can model it in our own lives. We probably all have these stories in the back of our minds about missed opportunities, right? And if you dwell on those missed opportunities, you can really find yourselves becoming bitter, becoming at a loss, bitter about the past. Oh, if I'd only done this. If I'd have only known then what I know now, right? And I'll read you a little story I read on the internet about a fella. I assume it's true. It's on the internet, right? It has to be. But supposedly this guy, he lived in a neighborhood, and some of his neighbors came to him with an offer, a business offering. They said, we're going to put together this cleaning service. Would you like to invest in it? Be a part of it? Nah, you guys go clean carpets on your own, he told them. Well, that business turned into what we call today service masters. Oops. Now, supposedly the same guy, another neighbor, his name was Croc. You might remember that name. And Mr. Ray Kroc came to him and said, look, I've already started a chain of small stores, hamburger joints. Wonder if you'd like to get in on the fourth one. Called the Golden Arches. You may have heard of that one, right? Nah, I'm not interested in cooking hamburgers. So it's an example. I hope it's true. I just repeated it. Hopefully I didn't repeat a lie, but you can think of examples in your own lives where you've missed out on something. And maybe you thought about it for a while. Hopefully you just learned to laugh at yourself. Just learn to use that humor and say, what a dummy I was. Oh, well, but I don't have to worry about it going forward. And notice the scripture from Ephesians chapter 5, where Paul talks about making the most of every day. But he's not talking about business opportunities, is he? So where our focus needs to be as followers of Christ is what Paul's referring to here, making the most of every day. And if you go on and read the rest of the chapter, you see he's talking about the marriage relationship. He's talking about the parenting relationship. He's talking about the real treasures that we have in this life, the real business that we're here for, our families. If we miss out on those opportunities, if instead we grab the other ones, like the McDonald's or the Service Master opportunities or whatever they might be in your life, we've actually missed the important stuff that Paul was talking about in that scriptures. Opportunities to listen, opportunities to hug, opportunities just to say, how'd your day go? Opportunities to teach. And those opportunities will never come again. I've seen that in my own life, in my work career. Early on when I was younger and things in the utility business, things don't move very fast. Lately they have, because a lot of us old geezers are retiring, right, Gene? And so there's been a lot more opening up, But in the old days, there just wasn't much movement. So you really had to be aggressive if you wanted to move up, as it were. I saw some of those opportunities. I'm not bragging on myself, but I said no thanks, because I had 3 kids at home, and I wasn't going to give up on those opportunities for the sake of maybe impressing some boss somewhere. Sorry, boss, can't do it. Remember a song by Harry Chapman? And that song really stuck with me. You probably recognize it when I say the name. Cats in the Cradle. Little Boy Blue. When you coming home, Dad? Don't know when, but we'll get together soon. That was the refrain of the song. It was a very piercing message that Harry had in that song. Very lasting message. Don't overlook those things, because those are actually the important things. Don't be the person who's focused on the wrong things and missing all those opportunities. So, with that, I think if you do that, if you focus on those opportunities, you'll find yourself fulfilling those proverbs that we read earlier. And so I want to get to the part of the lesson that really inspired me to go to this direction. And this is a story about, you may have heard it a couple of weeks ago on the news. If you did, don't be a spoiler. Keep your mouth shut, okay? But I want to play a newsreel, a video that explains what I'm talking about here. And hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about. God proves over and over again He's got a big, big sense of humor. Beth, could you play that?
A First Coast News exclusive arrest. Now to an amazing story, a First Coast News exclusive, a rescue at sea. 2 Jacksonville teenagers are back on dry land tonight after getting stranded in the middle of the ocean.
Now this happened on Senior Skip Day, and tonight we're hearing not only from those students, but from the boater who came to their rescue. First Coast News' Crystal Bailey is live in the Information Center. Crystal, this is just an incredible story.
Yes, this is the kind of story you'll be glad you stayed up to watch. It's unbelievable. Tyler Smith and Heather Brown say they were exhausted from treading water, ready to give up, when God literally answered their prayers.
I just cried out and I was like, God, please don't let this be the end.
Tyler Smith and Heather Brown, seniors at Christ Church Academy in Mandarin, decided to swim towards an island off Volano Beach, but rocky waters and a strong current kept them from their destination.
At that point, I also recognized that I don't see the rocks anymore. I don't see the rocks anywhere. I looked to the right and to the left, and there's no rocks to swim to anymore. It was just the island, which seemed like it was getting further and further away from us.
They were out of sight from people at the beach.
We were both dead tired at that time. My legs started to cramp, and all we could do was float and hold hands.
He was the first one to just start calling out to God, honestly, just praying for strength to swim.
Praying for a miracle when a boat appeared.
It wasn't until we got closer that I realized they didn't have life jackets on and they were treading water. Both of them were barely keeping their heads above water at that time. And then we kind of realized how frantic the situation was.
Eric Wagner says the seas were rough when he heard screams and an arm flail over the swells. So he turned his boat around.
It just came out of nowhere.
It really did come out of nowhere.
And pulled Tyler and Heather from the water.
I was just screaming help, over here, please. And I see this shaded hand through the screen wave back at me, and I'm like, this is it, we're getting out of here.
It wasn't until after they were aboard that they found out the name of the boat.
He said, the name of our boat is the Amen. I started crying.
Wagner, the Amen's owner, reuniting with the teens from New Jersey.
Are my lips still white? They a lot better.
But I'm glad you guys are doing well.
Wagner says they were 2 miles away from shore when he found them, shivering and pale.
You begged for his help and prayer, and he answered.
Oh my gosh.
We wouldn't have been there without it.
Now, shortly after they climbed aboard the boat, Wagner's crew called the U.S. Coast Guard. A rescue crew came to pick them up and took them back to shore. Now they're living to share their testimony, saying that God waited until they cried out before he sent them someone to save them. Now, the teens will be graduating from Christ Church Academy in a couple of weeks. Reporting live from the newsroom, Crystal Bailey, First Coast News, on your side.
If you didn't catch that, Eric Wagner, the owner of the boat, those videos, those shots you saw were from the actual rescue. Somebody was on the bridge videoing while they went to pick him up. But he's from New Jersey. He just happened to be launching out of Jacksonville and saw these kids out there and picked them up. Now, when I heard that on the news, I just busted out laughing. Isn't that just like our God? Help, save us, God, we're drowning. Okay. Here comes a boat. Amen. You just can't make that up, right? That's our God. And that's my message this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to share it with you, and I hope it helps lighten your day a little bit. Because sometimes we just get so serious about things, especially here when we come here. We think things have got to be so serious. It's all up to us. No, it's not. If we're like those little kids that Jesus greeted, we understand it's all about Him. It's just us trusting Him. And that alone should make us a little bit more lighthearted. So if you're here this morning and you need anything from us, you need something to know about prayer, or you want to know more about what it means to be in communion with Jesus Christ, from that, such as that verse we read from Isaiah 61, or you want to know something about what it means to be saved, to be part of God's family, I hope you'll let us know as we stand.